everything I've learned in the last 2.5 years of being in the sales space really comes down to the full cycle I've been through myself. When I started out, I didn't know what I was doing. I was actually working full time in a machine factory. Eventually, started going towards the sales space a little bit more. I bought some random course, didn't learn all too much, and eventually sort of began to taste what sales was actually like. I started out with being a setter, did some random sets here and there, did some dialing. Eventually started taking life a lot more serious. I started out with actually going to companies, looking into what their sellers were doing at that time. They were doing quite alright, but I always wanted to be better than what they were doing. And it came down for me to really having that systematic approach. I come from the space of being in machine building, so I knew how to make systems. But a lot of companies I was working with, they were all just shooting random arrows. They were going in one direction and they were going in another. None of them really had a system set up. As I was going through it in the companies I started setting for, I just always rose to the top. I always had a very systematic approach for myself. From on there, made it very easy for myself to just always go in the right direction, keep doing the same things that worked to get even better and better outcomes rather than just trying out different things all over again. And that's sort of when it dawned on me that sales isn't per se all about having the most fanciest words, the particular way in which you're saying things. It really comes down to the system that you've built around it all. Because you can be the best salesperson ever. You can be a closer that is even better than Jeremy Miner, for example. You can be someone who's so good at psychology that you can literally hypnotize people. But still, if you want to actually have numbers that convert, there must be a system around it in order to not waste your time, first of all, because if your show up rate is 40%, you're waiting on 60% of the leads to show up. You need to have actual qualified leads on your calendar, otherwise you're just hoping that people are going to be okay. Let's say someone jumps on a call, you have an absolutely amazing call with them. It comes down to them having absolutely zero money. Well, you just wasted an hour of your time, haven't you? And that's something I saw happening a lot with the closers I was actually setting for, because my sets here were good, but I had to disqualify like 60% of everyone I was speaking to. And the other setters, they were actually having better setting conversations. They were having better amounts of people who actually they booked in, but their qualify rate was a lot lower. So eventually it was sort of strange. Like they were setting more leads, I was setting less, but mine were converting better because I only set the leads that were actually going to be qualified rather than just wasting a closer's time. As I went eventually into being a closer myself, the same thing started coming up. The setters that I had, they kept sending these leads to me that were disqualified, had no money, were just wasting my time. And that's when I started noticing how annoying it really was as a closer, as a founder who was so busy with doing all sorts of other things to then also need to be screwing around with having all of these bad people on the calendar. So that's when I also started speaking to the offer owners I was always working with. And I was like, let me manage your teams around the point of making sure that the people who actually come on our calendars are going to be qualified. So I started training the setters and our amounts of bookings went a lot less high. We actually got less bookings every single week. But every single booking that we actually got in was qualified, was actually going to be able to be closed. And also the show up rate was way higher because we were able to get their intent to be way better. Of course, it also came from different aspects all around the system again, making sure they got enough follow messages, making sure we have actually results that we can send to them. All of those small details came together and that went from having a show up rate of like 40 to 60% to having a show up rate of 70 to 80%, but also having a qualify rate of around 50 to 60%, jumping to around 90 to 95%. So when we did that, we knew, okay, this is great. Now we have calls on our calendar. Of course, that's when we need to have marketing again. We needed to get more leads in the system flowing. So that's what we also started doing. We started partnering with people who did the marketing. As we were doing that constantly, we were implementing the same system. We made sure that everyone was actually qualified we were speaking to. We made sure that the show up rate didn't drop down. As we were doing that, the closer or the founder, his calendar kept getting filled up more and more and more, even my own. And then we had to hire another closer. At one point, we were able to actually take out the founder of the sales position so that he could actually focus on doing better marketing, doing better everything in the company, getting better results for the leads. But we as the closers were still getting good amounts of qualified leads rather than just screwing around. And we just kept on applying the same thing. With one company I actually did this with, we went from doing 30K in October to doing over 150K in December. That was what, two and a half, 3 months. The only things that we really did was systemize the whole process, making sure that everyone that actually came into our calls were going to be able to spend money. Of course, they probably weren't 100% bought in yet, so that's what the closer needed to do. But we always had the chance to actually close them. Then it came down to optimizing everything so the closer wasn't constantly working on following up with them and wasting all of their time around it. We made automated systems around that. When that was automated, we needed to have a better CRM to do better tracking, to really have an idea from what our numbers look like, to see the points that we needed to solve in order to scale even further. Eventually in January, the company did 250K. So was a big scale up. And when we did that, there wasn't much difference rather than those systems that we had implemented over a month ago, over 2 months ago, and constantly repeating the same cycle. Eventually, I decided to leave that company. I decided to go into another company with the same problem. They were having super good having super good qualification systems already in place, but for them, their show up rate was very little. So almost no one actually showed up. They had like a 30-40% show up rate, but the people who did show up, they did actually want to buy. So there we needed to solve the problem in a little bit of a different way. We needed to make sure to actually really be focused on getting people to show up. And the reason that was such a big deal of this company was because it was in the fitness space. As you probably know, in the fitness space, there's so many coaches, so many results out there. Why would someone really want to join their call? We needed to get them more incentivized to actually join their call. We send more free stuff towards them before jumping on. And the people actually went through all of that free stuff. They were also even more qualified or more bought in to actually buying, but also at the same time, because they were getting these constant reminders that were actually valuable rather than just say, hey, are you going to be showing up tonight? They actually started showing up a lot more. We went from 30 to 40% around February to being on around 70, 80% in March. So we more than doubled it in a time span of just 1 month. All of this again came down to looking at what the problem was, where we were lacking, and then from on there implementing systems around that. So it wasn't something that a human could just screw up again. The founder in this company was heavily involved in still sending messages out to people who were trying to show up. And he was just wasting so much of his time around that he couldn't even get into the marketing. So as that was happening, there was way too little call flow. Of course, they had some good qualified leads, but there was too little call flow, too little show-ups. We fixed the show-up rates, but then we need to make sure that the founder could just go out of that position. So again here, we started dialing up the amount of leads they're actually getting into the calendar by focusing on the marketing with another team. Then when we were doing that, eventually more leads came in. Then we decided to get a new closer in. When we got that new closer in, we also directly got 2 setters to help him with doing everything around making sure everyone was going to show up, really following the system. Those setters were going to reach out to people who didn't actually book in, and they had a whole system that they could follow in order to everyone that they were speaking to actually join the meetings again as well. And instead of going like, I'm not so interested, completely turning them around to actually being interested and jumping on that meeting again. The founder went out of the sales position, from on there went into doing more marketing, doing more videos online, which made our amount of organic lead flow as double as it was prior to us doing this whole system with them. And again, with these companies, the only big differences that we were really making was the systemized way of doing everything. They were just eyeballing everything, trying different things out constantly. They weren't looking into the data. They weren't analyzing the stuff that was going well and the stuff that was going bad. We needed to focus on the things that were going good and bad at the same time. That's what I did when I joined every single company that I worked with. And every single time we were able to minimize the things that were going bad or completely change them around so they were actually going good. But we were also looking into the things that were going good and getting them from being good to actually being the best that they could be. Again, with going into it with a systematic approach. This is exactly what you should be doing in your company as well if you're struggling from going from like 30, 40, 50K a month to being in that 100K, 200K plus range, because it's the systemized approach that is going to save you time, that you can focus on other sides of the business. It's going to make sure that you're not just throwing money out the window and you're actually not wasting your closer's time. Because probably you've had it before. You had a closer on your call team and they were like, well, I'm gonna leave because I'm not making enough money here. And it all came down to them not having a system that they could follow. So they were losing leads constantly on the account. They were just sitting there and then no one shows up. Maybe your lead quality was good, but because there's too little leads, they had to jump to another company to make their money. When you would have had that system in place, they would have stayed constantly with you to actually see their own money grow as well. So when you approach it on a whole systematic way, rather than just eyeballing everything, you're going to be amazed by the differences that are going to be made. And if you need help with that, reach out to me. Ciao, ciao.